Guys, this is a special podcast episode. I got to chat with my friend Joy, who I've known since, oh my gosh, we've known each other since we were basically teenagers in college. I met Joy at Berklee College of Music, where I attended, and Joy was, I remember, we get into how we met in the episode, but this is a person that I actually have a lot in common with. Joy was raised in Christian faith, just like I was. Joy has had all kinds of deconstructions of their own throughout their life, with how to view sexuality and gender identity and all kinds of stuff. We get into the nitty gritty about it actually pretty early on in our conversation. Joy is obviously a musician and has done the touring thing and the musician thing and the producer thing and the singing and all the above. And Joy is currently a very successful entrepreneur and is married to a beautiful woman. And Joy is just a joy to talk to. So enjoy my conversation with Joy. I don't know if you remember the day we met. I remember meeting you.
I do remember meeting you. Was it at the big Berklee orientation thing?
Yes. You were in line in front of me and you had a Bible on you. I was like, oversaved much? You had
Did I have a Bible on you?
You had a Bible on you, and it was I think it was like a placement audition or something. Like they wanted to see where your skills were to place you in like the private lessons for Berklee.
Yeah.
I think it was for that. And you were like praying. you were there for drums, right? You started on drums.
I did.
And you were like praying for like focus and whatever. And I was like, okay, I guess there's safe people here. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
I imagine your faith and your beliefs and whatever aren't the same as they used to be when you were 19. How old were you?
Yeah, definitely 19. That's a really interesting. I love that because as early as 2018, I used to bring my Bible to work. So, there have been a lot of, I guess, twists and turns in my relationship to spirituality and to religion. And, it depends on it. I hate to say this, but it just depends on like what's going on in my life. I think that kind of brings into focus certain things or not.
By the way, I'm hitting record from here on. I'm record. All right,
that's great. And I have learned probably in the past, I will say 5 years specifically, to balance the respect I have for the church and the Black church and my idea of Christ and salvation and my ideas around the doctrine, that I grew up with, and to like respect that and to have a relationship with that while also balancing like what I know to be true in my body. And when I talk about my body, I'm not talking about like anything sexual. I'm talking about like anybody who is a spiritual person or any person who has been like, involved in religious spaces knows the feeling of experiencing a higher power or like, wow, this is bigger than me. And I think that what separates, certain folks like myself and others who are like extremely, plugged into like a church community or like extremely like doctrinated and, they're not flexible at all. I think the difference is that I have learned to identify that feeling in every single space that I go into. It does not have to be a church. It does not have to even be a religious place. I can feel, what we used to say is growing up, the Holy Ghost at the strip club, right?
Okay.
And I can feel that.
Shabba.
I get those feelings. You know what they say, you're quicker than your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that at brunch, in Atlanta. Like if anybody's been to Atlanta, like the brunch scene is like real big, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
bottomless mimosas and all this stuff. And I don't even drink, but like my wife really enjoys these brunch things. And like we just
So
went to
you said
one.
my wife. So, but for anyone listening, if we can get just a little bit of background of where you are today, who you are married to, how do you identify, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
the whole nine.
Yeah, I'll give the rundown. So I identify as non-binary.
Okay. What are your
Different for
pronouns?
they, them are my
Okay.
pronouns. I will I'm okay with he, him, depends on, the situation, but they, them is the proper, how I like to be addressed.
Okay.
Um, I not being non-binary is different for everybody, and this is of course another podcast, another conversation. It's different for everybody, but for me, I have known since I was like 3 or 4
Mm.
that I was like a man living inside of a woman's body, but I have grown to really appreciate certain feminine traits and feminine, um I guess you would say, like the way you raise a little girl is very different than for some parents.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to be controversial, but for some parents, for the way they raise a little girl is different than the way they raise a little boy. And I was raised in a Christian, Pentecostal Christian home with parents who were pastors. So I was very much raised in a traditional sense of how you raise a little girl.
Okay.
And there are certain things about that rearing and that raising that gave me more access to my emotions, that gave me more access to verbalizing certain thoughts and feelings, that gave me more access to understanding myself in a certain way. Some of that is a good thing and some of it is a bad thing.
Mm.
And so for me, when I think about like transitioning and all these different ways in which you can express gender, I am going to have top surgery in another year. But for me, I never felt shame or embarrassment around my
Mm.
body as many of my trans brothers and sisters do. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment that comes with being in a body that doesn't feel right. And I can't say that I've ever felt that way specifically. So
And
non-binary.
and you're
Go
married
ahead.
to a beautiful woman,
And I'm married to a beautiful woman
and
who
she identifies as she. Am I
she
okay?
identifies as a woman. And if I was to bring her on right now, she would say she was tricked because she thought she was marrying, she thought she was dating a woman and came to understand probably within a couple weeks of us dating, like, oh, this is a man and
Mm.
that's okay. Like, that's fine, but I didn't expect that. And so now I have to recalibrate how I think about certain things in our relationship. And so I tell everybody we have a same sex relationship, but we have a very heterosexual dynamic, which is hard for people to understand.
I
But
get it.
if you were around us, it's very like it's definitely not two women in a relationship.
I
And
mean,
it's,
I've always kind of seen like a gender identifying. It's just kind of like just painting with different colors, and it's like you put our colors together, it's purple.
exactly.
Uh,
And
it's like sometimes I paint with red, sometimes I paint with blue, sometimes I paint with green. It don't matter, but this is the result of what we are together.
100%. Yeah. And we're happy and we're in love and we're business partners and all those things. And I think my sexuality and my gender identity was always kind of known to me, but you know, I was in the prison that many of us are in growing up in the home that I grew up in, where it was like you have to present a certain way, you have to be a certain way, you have to wear dresses, you have to do this, you have to do this. And by the time I got to Berklee, when you and I met, I was still very much indoctrinated into that and still trying to make a square peg fit into a circle.
Mm.
And I hadn't yet let go of trying to fit my life into what I thought it was going to be, which was like,
I don't think you're realizing how old we are, Joy, but this was a long time ago.
this was a long
and
time
and I don't
ago.
think that especially not our country, had the language for a lot of this. Like we just didn't have like the square peg. What we didn't have the tools, literally, to express what it was that people had been feeling for thousands of years, or forever.
100%.
So every time I think about this stuff, I have like sort of like a half and half in my mind. Number one, I have sort of like, oh, we were so ignorant, we didn't know. And number two, like a mercy, like a compassion, a grace
I
for it.
love
It's
that.
like we weren't there yet, and
I love
we
that.
can't. It's man, I don't want to. Sometimes I think about like how people think about race and how they thought about race in the 60s and how different it is today. And I don't want to give them grace. It's like, that was evil. Stop it. But it's like, I'm imagining my kids being like, and you guys what? And you said what to who? And you
Exactly.
dead named who? And me be like, please give me
I
grace,
don't know. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I try to, I'm one of those people, and I think you've seen some of my stuff on Facebook. Like, people get mad at me sometimes for giving compassion and grace to people who are,
Hmm.
identified as oppressors, or people who are identified, in certain groups. Like, I'll have grace and compassion for, you know, just the thought. Like, I understand as a person who grew up in a Christian household and had Black parents, and also as a person who, left a emotionally abusive relationship.
Mm.
When you're told certain things over and over and over again, and there's a threat of, like, I don't know, just like
Hell.
your life, yeah, hell, or just even just like your lifestyle not being the same. Like, I try to feel compassion, because I know, like, if I look at the decisions that I made when I was in my last marriage, no shots fired, but like when I look at those decisions, I'm like, what were you on, bro?
Mm.
But my mind was just conditioned in a certain way at that time, so I was making those, decisions. So I have grace and compassion for people, but what I don't have grace and compassion for is, once you've been exposed to
Hmm.
the truth, you continue down a certain path. That's where the grace and compassion goes out the door. It's like, at that point, it's a choice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
I kind of see it like, I remember someone explaining this to me when I was really young. And it was like, I remember, as a typical 13-year-old, whatever, I probably thought like gay people are icky, boys and boys kissing is icky or whatever. And someone explaining to me, it's like, would you ever want to do these things unless there was nothing like they kind of presented to me like, would you want to kiss a boy? It's like, no, I wouldn't. It's like, they feel the same way. And it's like, so it's icky to them. And it's like, exactly. And it's like, for someone to call me she, or call me something that I feel that I am not, it's as icky. And it's like, it's something that, as soon as you're able to put yourself in other people's shoes, you cannot possibly not have
facts,
compassion for them. And it's like, there's
facts,
no other way of seeing it. Like, and I think that whenever people um continue to have, like, hateful conservative thoughts about this stuff, I'm just like, then you haven't placed yourself in their shoes. Like, you haven't done the practice of like lifting up your brain and put it in theirs, and feeling what it is to feel the things they're feeling. Because as soon as you've done that, then you would understand. And I don't know, man. I feel like the older I'm getting, I'm also getting more liberal. Like,
yeah.
I forgive everybody for everything nowadays. So I'm just like,
But well, that's another thing is, what I've noticed is, the experiential learning piece is missing for a lot of people.
yeah.
And, in the words of Lauren London, life is going to chin check you one way or another. And we all have that opportunity in life where something happens to us, and you like, oh, like a light bulb goes off, and you're like, oh my God. Like, I was judging people who made these kind of decisions last year, and now I'm in this, you know, situation. Like, if we were to like go to a prison, and by the way, I've spoken to, I have friends and people who, are justice involved, what we say, justice involved folks. And you talk to them about the decisions
I
they
have
were
never heard
making.
that term before.
You've never heard justice involved? Yeah,
No.
it's a much more respectful way to reference people who have been to prison, or who, have had different problems with the law. People who are felons, so on and so forth. And, I have people in my life, because of the kind of work that I do, that are justice involved. And
Mm.
those individuals, when you meet them and you talk to them about the decisions that were made around the time that was pivotal for them, when their life was changing and they were about to either go to jail or have, some, proceedings with the law, most of the time when you start to get to the core of what the issues were, they all lead back somehow to need, trauma, no support, no guidance, living in an underserved community where there weren't programs and ways of diverting people's attention, or young people's attention. There was no STEM program, there was no after school program. The only thing you would do was sports. So when you talk to folks like that, and they sometimes haven't even analyzed it that way, but if you've had enough conversations with the same kind of people, you're like, oh, America's kind of crap for people who don't have money,
Yep.
and that caused you to get into a life of crime, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a certain amount of experiences, and listen, I'm not, I say this all the time, like, there's way more in life for me to experience. I'm only 36, and but I have led a lot of different lives. I've had a lot of different kinds of careers. I've been in a lot of different spaces with a lot of different people. I've lived a lot of different places. When you just have a certain amount of conversations and you're exposed to the world in a more comprehensive way, you start to have a lot of compassion for people, because you're like, oh, like, I was judging you based on this thing that I saw on the internet, and now I've had a conversation with you, and I realize that all of your decisions weren't even made in the moment. They were informed by years of
Yeah.
trauma, of
Generations.
generations of things.
Let me tell you. So I grew up in Jersey City. Jersey City is always in those lists. If you look up like the most diverse cities in the country, Jersey City is always in those lists. It's the town right across from Manhattan, and it's more diverse than Manhattan. It's more diverse than New York City.
Wow.
It's extremely diverse, and I grew up next to all kinds of people. I literally had the mayor living around the corner from me, and then next door, I lived in the projects. It's like I lived in the actual projects, and then like around the corner was, it's like really diverse, really mixed. There was like millionaires around the corner. There was people on Section 8. Like we lived in Section 8. And I remember, so, I was raised, I'm Dominican. I was raised around people who historically invented the New World version of racism. We were Christopher Columbus for a stop. A lot of the derogatory terms came from our country, so we know how to do racism. I've spoken about this in a previous episode of this podcast, where Dominicans are the connoisseurs, chef's kiss of racism.
Wow.
And so, like, the way that we saw black people, or the way I was told to look at black people, was, you're living in the same country as them. Why are they fill in the blank? Why you and your neighbor go to the same school? Why are you getting better grades? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there could only be two reasons. The reason A, something about their environment is different than mine, even if we're living in the exact same place, which was not the reason I saw until later on in life. Or reason B, there's something inherently, I'm a racist.
Right.
It's either
right.
A or B. So
Yeah.
it's like, I did not make that choice of A or B until later on in life. And I always thought, it's like, oh, it's their culture. It's the way that they live their life. It's the way that they see the world. Blah, blah, blah. No, it's the way the world sees them. It's the way the world treats them. And it's, and the more I think about like how similar our upbringings were, living literally on the same block, going to the same school, doing the same things, and still having different results, that only further proves the point.
100%.
So it's like, it has to be, unless I'm just a racist, it has to be something about the way the world is treating them. And you would think, growing up in such a diverse place, that being an ally would foster allyship. But being Dominican didn't help, and also growing up in the church didn't help. And yeah, so yeah, the past couple of years, I want to say ever since right when Donald Trump announced, that's when it really started for me, which is really late. I'm like ashamed at how late it started, but I got here.
It doesn't really matter how late or how early it is. It I think what matters most is that you get there, and that you're like, the mark of a intelligent person to me is that they are able to receive new information and change their opinions and their thoughts based on that.
Hmm.
If you can't do that for me, then we just can't. Like, I literally unfriended somebody yesterday for an opinion on Black Panther. Like that's how deep this goes for
What
me.
are your opinions on Black Panther?
I mean, if you want to jump,
This is it. If you want to get into that,
let me
this is
say this:
exactly.
if you want this podcast to get controversial, then here it is, baby. Listen, and let me just say a disclaimer. One of my favorite Instagram influencers says, "This is my mouth, my tongue. I say what I want. I don't care." Like I'm one of those people that I really have learned to be so open to new information that my opinions, when I speak them out, I'm just like, no matter what anyone else says to me, unless they bring me another perspective that I had not considered before, I'm always going to respect my opinion. Like I'm always going to respect, because I do the work,
Okay.
and I'm not saying in the world of Facebook and Instagram, I think sometimes people share their opinion without doing the work. And I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody. I'm just simply saying that, like, I think I posted on Facebook the list of things I do before I share something on Facebook. And somebody was like, wow, that's really thorough. And I'm like, I thought that's how.
I thought that's how you. I don't know. I know I have some opinions that don't have a lot of basis, and I'm bigoted about them, like pizza. But but
Unless we talk about Popeyes, Popeyes chicken sandwich over Chick-fil-A, I'm going to do some research, what I'm saying, before these things happen. Okay, so
exactly.
so I don't know if I should tell you what the opinion was that I saw first, or if I should tell you what my thoughts and feelings were first.
No, tell me what you saw.
What I saw. Great. So this young man posted, he is a father, he is a Black father, and he posted that he was not going to go see Black Panther, or he wasn't going to take his child to see the new Black Panther, because and he'd rather take his child to see Avatar, because it speaks more to the legacy of like fatherhood. And it seems like Black Panther was trying to remove Black fathers from the picture.
Okay.
And
one would argue that all superheroes movies do that, but whatever.
I just simply unfriended him instead of commenting and arguing back and forth, because I'm at the point in my life where I don't go back and forth unless I really feel that the person is capable of receiving my perspective, right? You don't have to say that I'm right, but you do have to like be open to another perspective other than your own. So I just simply unfriended him. And the reason why is you were so your lazy self wouldn't even let you go see the movie.
So they hadn't even seen it yet.
Okay. And you came on his Facebook on Beyonce's internet and gave us an opinion about the legacy of fatherhood within a movie you haven't seen. Unfriend button. Unfriend.
But the silly thing is, it's like I haven't even heard a single take about the Black Panther movies that involve fatherhood. It's like not a central theme. Maybe it. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet.
Here's what I'm gonna say is that I understand fully how, as Black people or any marginalized group, these really big cultural things that happen for us, like a Black Panther, there's almost a feeling like it's never going to happen again. There's like a belief in the scarcity of that representation. And let me tell you, no one knows that more than me, because every single movie, TV show, we talked about Insecure a little bit earlier, that I enjoy, there's very rarely a masculine presenting Black female in those shows. Right? The scarcity of representation of people.
I'm trying to think about Insecure. Was there?
There was no.
There wasn't.
I think there may have been maybe not in the characters, not in any way that was,
Not in the poster people.
not in the poster people, and definitely not in the characters in any way that's like, you know, that was like I can remember. And I've watched that show a few times front to back, especially since it's gone off, because I love that show so much and I love Issa Rae. Well, the one thing I can say that Issa Rae is doing is when I watch her new show, which is called Rap Shit. I think it's called Rap Shit. Her new show, there is a masculine presenting Black female in that show as one of the characters, right? So I don't know if she heard this feedback that I'm saying from somebody,
sure
but whatever.
Did. I'm certain she has.
For whatever, right? She heard that feedback, or she thought about it herself, and she put that into this new show. And the character is wonderful, and the character is like a great character, right? But just to get in, like, let's dive deeper into that. The character is a pimp, right? And the character does like a lot of illegal things, and the character makes questionable decisions. Although I love the character and I think that the character represents a really important thing on the show, there may be a masculine presenting Black female who says, well, they represent us, but look how they represent us.
Yeah.
It's a pimp.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm just happy about the representation.
I'm trying to think about if there's been any like Dominicans in the MCU, and I don't think there has been. And it better not be like a bodega owner.
Right. That's crazy. We gotta have a bodega though, man.
You know what? There probably has. I mean, Spider-Man is in New York, so I'm sure there has been some Dominican.
Miles Morales is Puerto Rican.
Yeah, but
right?
he hasn't showed up in the MCU yet, technically.
He hasn't.
So he's been mentioned, but he hasn't been casted.
He hasn't showed up.
Yeah.
So I said all that to say I understand that there is a scarcity of Black leading men.
Mm-hmm.
But I, as a movie buff and as a person who really loves TV shows and series and streamers and all that, I can also tell you that there's a lot more today than there was even 4 years ago. And movies like Shang-Chi, The Woman King, I can mention 5 other movies that really stand on the shoulders of Black Panther, right?
Yeah.
We as a people, and when I say we as a people, I'm talking about like the human race, have a really terrible belief in scarcity. And so the recast T'Challa movement, which I just read through all of the like things that they were asking for in the recast T'Challa movement, really just speaks to a belief that like this is the only it's to me what it sounds like. And anybody who hears this, you want to get in my inbox and have an educated conversation, we can. But what I got from the recast T'Challa movement was, we are never going to get a Black superhero ever again. So you can't take this character away from us, because if you do, then we'll never get this ever again.
Yeah, I have really mixed like feelings about that. Like I understand, I get it. I understand both sides to it.
Of course.
Like I don't want the character to end because I like that character, but it's like make new characters. But at the same time, making new characters that people care about is really difficult. But at the same time, freaking the MCU's done it 1,000 times. Who the heck was Shang-Chi? Like I never heard of that character before they made the movie. So it's
right. And spoiler alert.
Both.
I'm gonna just say spoiler alert, because you'll probably put this in your podcast description. You'll mark down the time. Spoiler alert. They give us have you seen the movie?
Mm-mm. I plan to, but I haven't seen it yet.
All I'm gonna say is
I don't mind spoilers. Like spoilers. Yeah.
All I'm gonna say is, because I don't want you to like this. I want you to have the feeling of the moment.
Okay.
Like, because I had it. I will just say this: that Marvel literally heard what the recast T'Challa people were saying, and they literally went into the movie and were like, "Okay, guys, here's a wide open door to what you have asked for." And it may not be in the way that you're asking for it, but T'Challa will live on. And the fact that that part of it is ignored makes me believe that in this day and age, a lot of people are very concerned with doubling and tripling down on their opinions. They're more concerned with that, like, I'm going to stand on what I'm saying, than they are concerned with actually like listening to hear and being open to, you know, different perspectives.
I,
It's
I
not,
I've seen that
go ahead.
with like with how people view Kanye, and it's like the Kanye thing is an actively changing, and it's an active volcano. There's new things happening.
Yeah.
So it's okay to change your opinions about Kanye, because Kanye will say something today and then will say something again, something else tomorrow, and people just won't. I'm like, bro, like you can't have the same opinion about him today, hanging out with Nick Fuentes, a literal Nazi, as you did last week. Like you could argue he's playing 4D chess and that it's all part of his plan and he's a genius. Okay, have that opinion, fine, but something's got to give. Like it's an actively changing situation. So why aren't the viewpoints actively changing? I
Agree.
find that to be
Agree.
crazy. When people can't do that, it's crazy to me.
Agree. And again, I understand the need to, or the feeling of wanting to protect, they're like, protect people who protect people who don't even need protection. Right.
People standing billionaires nowadays, like
Oh, yes, I stand, like, I stand with Dave Chappelle.
mm,
Are you standing with him? Dave Chappelle is a millionaire.
mm,
He's okay. Like, and this even goes into like my opinions on cancel culture,
mm.
and you know, I heard Cat Williams, who I never thought would be like the voice of reason in all of this, discussing, just like comedy and the things people say and stuff like that. And like, I just feel that as someone who grew up in the like pre Instagram, pre Facebook, pre social media like era, people are just really thirsty to like share without necessarily being thirsty for the knowledge and the implications of what's happening for more than just your demographic. And it's really sad. It's actually changing how I feel about hip hop.
Mm.
It's making hip hop and a lot of art forms that I used to enjoy not so enjoyable anymore. Um,
One could argue it's not as good as
one
it
could
used to be.
definitely one could definitely argue it's not as good, but I also think that, I guess the argument, I'm just thinking out loud here, I guess that argument that like it's not as good makes people have to do things that I don't agree with, or do things that are like, for lack of a better term, publicity stunts
Mm-hmm.
to draw attention to like what it is they're doing. Like, it's not like, oh, he's such a great rapper. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna say this thing about Megan Thee Stallion. And that's what it's like, okay, so you had people talking all day,
Yeah.
but and you did, and let me tell you this, like, I respect dude's pen. Like, I respect what he's been able to do. But as someone who is a fan of like the level of songwriting and the level of production, I just was like, wow, this was like an easy grab for you, right? Like, it was like, oh, I'm just going to do this. And so people are going to be talking about the album. I'm not saying that that was the intention, but the line draws with me, the line draws when we start making fun of someone's trauma or pain in a way that's like, would you say that? Like, I'm just thinking of like being at a dinner, right? Like, me and you are like taking our wives out to dinner and we're all sitting there talking and like
Never. They would never say
sharing.
that in front of each other.
Right?
Never.
Like, we're sharing appetizers and like, I know that this thing has happened to your wife, or something has happened to my wife, and we're just sitting here and I make a joke about it. Like, that is a moment that we know in real life would either one of us is going to get up from the table, right? Somebody going
Mm-hmm.
to be like, hold on a second, right? And then there's going to be an argument, and there's going to be right. So when we start doing this thing where it's like a satire of real life, or like we start making like everything's not, and this is going to get into the whole comedy conversation, but like, everything's not funny.
Mm.
Everything's not a joke.
I want to say The first time Dave Chappelle got in trouble with trans people, um, my opinion was comedians should be able to say whatever the hell they want. It's a joke, right? And then he got in trouble it was three times. Then he did another special where he like said more jokes, and it was like, bro, like what's going on? And then the third time was the one where he was just like serious talking about his friend, right? Am I getting the timeline right? The third one was like the third time that he like had a special involved that he talked about trans people, and that's when he just was trying to like explain himself, and then he talked about his trans friend, whatever.
As yes, yes.
It just didn't feel like, okay, now you're not, it's not jokes anymore, and it's just you talking. Like apologize, man. Like like
And this
don't be a dick, you know, like just don't be mean, you know. And then it just, since then it just felt kind of like, I saw this take on TikTok of this old Jewish guy. He's like he was probably in his 60s. You know, he's like, I'm not really a comedy person, like I don't whatever. So he watched the specials, and then he watched the SNL, the recent SNL thing, and he talked about like, he explained like the concept of punching down, and just kind of like how Dave Chappelle is a much better comedian than this, and he doesn't have to do this punching down thing. And then he
agreed.
compared it to jokes that he heard growing up in like the 60s and 70s and stuff, and he was like, this is like what comedians did a long time ago, and Dave Chappelle is supposed to be this like evolved modern guy.
Avant-garde.
Yeah, it's like, why is he doing this old thing? Like it just seems like he has the ability to he can be better. And that's where I was like, it's true. That's at that point it was like, yeah, Dave Chappelle like screwed up.
Let me give you a good example of this, right? Because I always love to give people the real world implications of what's happening, right? So there was a special he did where he referred to the LGBTQIA plus community as alphabet people.
Mm-hmm.
Or like the alphabet mafia or something. I never saw it, but I know that it came. The source was this specific special he did.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and so I hadn't seen the special, but like I just knew that this came from him because I saw a lot of like, kind of like jokes alluding to like that, on Facebook and like around people. Okay. Fast forward after that special, like a year later after that special, I know, I'm not going to mention anybody's name, but like I have a musician friend of mine who is gay, and he's openly gay and everybody knows it. And he was on a gig with 4 or 5 people that I know through the musician community. And I don't think they were aware he's gay. And if they were aware, they were just being assholes. But they spent this whole like 25 minutes during the time where they were setting up making these jokes about the gay community and referring to them as alphabet people. Right. And it was a lot of like, yeah, they think they can this and the blah, 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 blah. And I've heard this sentiment a lot. And my friend was like texting me about it. And like, I was like, I'm not going to go as far as saying something dumb like, oh, I was heartbroken. But like, I was sad because these are all musicians that I like really like and look up to and like have had on my gigs and like things like that. And there have been several other times where I've been in a situation where I'm overhearing these things because I'm very loud and open about like who I am. And I think that, if you're on a gig where I'm paying you, then you probably might not like say these things, but also like, keeping it real, like for the past, like probably 5-10 years, I haven't been booking anybody. I'll say 5 years. I haven't been booking anybody for anything, right? Like small little things, but I'm not in the community like I was before.
Yeah.
So like, I just hear these things. Like people will just like text me like, Joy, can you imagine I was on this gig? And it's more than one time. Musicians I love. Guys that like, if you ask me, can he play and should I hire him? I'm going to say yes. But they spend a lot of time on these gigs saying these things. And I believe that if I was to have like a heart to heart with Dave Chappelle, and I was to tell him like, this is how your comedy skit, which you get and you understand because you're not homophobic, translated to like years and years of just like torture for me and other gay
Yeah.
and trans people in these spaces.
Yeah.
You had the kind of platform where your intelligence, and I said this when, the last special came out. I believe that he's intelligent. I believe that
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
he's doing these kind of highbrow jokes that like you kind of have to have a certain level of intelligence to understand. I get it, but I'm just trying to help you understand how in the comment sections of my page and on my wife's page and other LGBTQ plus people we know, you get referred to as the source
Mm-hmm.
of whatever disgusting opinion this person is going to say. And someone will say, well, can you blame him for that? No, we can't blame him for that. But what we can ask is, please don't give these people whipping sticks, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I
And
don't think they realize like how much they're adding to, because I think that a lot of like creators, they really feel like, you start off as just kind of like adding to the culture community, and then you get to a point where you're part of shaping the culture community. You're not just adding to it. You're not just adding pages to the book. You're like you're one of the authors. And we're gonna look back. When I think about Richard Pryor's time, he was like a voice for a lot of people, and he was like a big, whether he liked it or not, was a major representation for many, many opinions of black men of the time. And it's easy to look back at the things that he was saying and the things that he was expressing and be like, this is where black men were at this time. And Dave Chappelle is at that point, I believe. And
facts.
like not acknowledging the fact that you're adding to the glossary, you're giving people new language, is kind of silly. Like I think that what happened with Dave Chappelle is because he disconnected himself from like the mainstream stuff. Like he's not connected to a network or contracts or whatever. He's just he's doing his own thing. He just goes on stand-ups or whatever. He doesn't have like multi-million-dollar contracts with whatever. Like he truly is independent. I think that because he is set up that way, he thinks that he's free from that stuff. It's like, bro, no, you're not. Like you are responsible for the opinions of a lot of impressionable people. And
Woo!
it's just true. So as soon as you're able to acknowledge that, I feel like it's like a lack of maturity on his, which is weird to say about a dude who's like, how old is he, in his 50s?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I also have heard the take that like certain comedians get to a certain age where they are truly out of touch with the pulse of the culture,
Yeah.
and you have to do some considerable work to like stay in touch, and some of them just stop doing that work, but
I think he's getting there.
they keep just like spitting out whatever it is whatever it is they think is gonna, and they double and they triple down, and then it's like it's hard. There's a lot of comedians. What's his name? There's one comedian who like went into that part of his life and he was like golden. Short little white man, George Carlin.
Yes.
He went into that age of his career and he was doing his thing.
Mm.
So I would love to do a case study on what did he do to kind of stay in touch. You know, I don't think Dave Chappelle's in touch, and I like him a lot, and I think he's really funny, and I respected him so much for disconnecting from the corporate, that corporate beast,
Mm-hmm.
to just be free. And I also like respected him coming out and being like and saying what I had been saying as a black person who went to school with white people for a lot of my life. I remember in high school, I felt a certain level of discomfort around all of my peers, like love for Dave Chappelle and the show.
Yeah.
Like, I just would be like, that's not funny to me. Like, certain references they would be making in the show, they loved it so much. And I
That was
knew
part of
that
his thing too. He's like, well, too many white people are laughing at my jokes.
they're
Something's
laughing.
wrong.
But right. But what he said was they're not laughing with me.
Mhm.
Like, the laugh is a little different. And that's ultimately what made him disconnect. When I tell you I respect that, because the millions of dollars, and they called him crazy, they did all the millions of dollars that he left on the table to leave that, like, I respected. So when he came back with that movie, The Block Party, and he was bringing all those artists out. He was so much respect for him, right? And then I turned on his special that day after being abused by certain things that he had said, not from him, but from, other folks. And then I turned on his Netflix special, like, let me just watch this because people are talking about it. And I just was like, ugh. Like, I folded up and I was like, man, like, and the double and triple down that celebrities do nowadays, I think is indicative of people feeling that because there's so many of us and one of them, right? So if like 1,000 people are like, Joy, you hurt our feelings, me apologizing is in some way connected to or indicative of my weakness or
Yeah.
my not being able to like stand up in who I am. I'm gonna stand 10 toes down. And it's like, that's what you stand at 10 toes down for? That's what you like.
I think also there's, and I hope that this is, I don't know why I'd be accept to this, but I think there's a certain limit to people's ability to catch a progressive wave in a sense. Like if you think about like some of the boomers and stuff that are like, holding on to some conservative values, whatever. There was a time in, the summer of love when their opinions were the most progressive, and they've kind of like evolved with the times and then hit a certain limit. It's like, okay, this is as far as I go. And I think that he may have hit his limit. Like I don't know if it's, I just, maybe I'm just being a cynic, but I don't know if there's necessarily hope for him like changing his viewpoints on this sort of thing. And I think that he's too old. And I think about that sometimes, and I'm just like, some of the people who at one time would have been seen as like a wildly progressive thinker is now seen as like the dude that's so like last year. And I see the same thing with like conservative values too. Like the other day, not the other day, this was a while back, but I was fired from a mega church, if you're not aware. But
I think we had a long conversation about this.
yeah. So the racism that I was calling out, which was the catalyst for my getting fired, was it just felt like old racism. Like this is like, we're past this. Like this is like 80s racism. The statements that were being made were about like, it was like welfare queen logic, like Ronald Reagan type racism. And I'm like this is old. Like we're past, so I think that the same thing is happening with like with progressive thinking, where it's like there might be something that our children will say, you plan on having kids? You plan on raising any
I
small
do.
people? All
I
right.
do, and
So
I have raised some small folks my last marriage, so
yeah.
I know the vibes.
Yeah, I have two toddlers, and I have a feeling that there's going to be something that they're going to tell me that I'm going to be like, oh, that's my beyond my ability to evolve. I'm going to die in this place, and I hope you're better than me. And like I don't know. I don't know what those viewpoints will be. And I hope that I can evolve and allow my worldview to be shaped and to progress. But I wonder if that's what happened with him, where he just sort of hit his cap. It's so funny. Like he had Yasin Bey and what's the other guy's name, whatever, for on SNL.
Talib Kweli.
Yeah, and I was like, this feels like you could have had a new artist. Like that was a missed opportunity. And it's like, oh yeah, you're Dave Chappelle. You're like old.
And
like,
that's part part of it for me is I'll never lose hope.
Mm.
Because if he is to have a kumbaya moment, as I call it, that would be amazing, man. Like, can you imagine how the world would change with the influence someone like his has?
Mm.
Like, imagine how amazing it would be if he could just like have this really great turnaround moment. And I'll always have hope for that because I do believe he's an intelligent human being. And I think that I've seen that in certain cases where somebody's just like, hey, I was dumb and stupid and I was wrong. And it's just like played out really well for them in their career and all that stuff. But not only that, that helped to shift. Like you said, it creates culture. Like it helped to shift. And I don't think he's aware of how important he is in the shift in the way in which Black men specifically view and treat the LGBTQ community.
Mm.
He doesn't know how big of a like he just has no idea of his impact in that area. And if he was to change his mind and to really dig deep into it and like make it funny, I think it could be revolutionary. So I'm gonna just keep my hope for that.
Yeah. One thing that, growing up in the church has taught me is like forgiveness. And it's something that I try to apply with everything, like you were talking about, having having hot takes. And one of them was like, I I remember with all this Jeffrey Dahmer stuff, I was like, I just felt terrible about like how his life ended, and he was like killed in prison or whatever, right? And I was like, that happened because I don't believe that like justice really happened in his case. Like, there's no way that a person would do the things he did out of just evil and not like super motivated by like, mental, disease. Like, the dude was messed up, and people were like, they couldn't believe that I would ever have, possess an opinion like that. Look, the terrible things that he did, and it was disgusting. But it's like, duh, like that just makes it that much more crazy to me, and I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm over forgiving, but like, I feel like as much as we're able to hold people accountable and the cancel culture thing, and as much as we should be able to just be like, okay, I'm not listening to this person on Spotify anymore, we should be able to like forgive as well. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in our conversation, we actually got into discussing some of the history and events involving Chris Brown. And after listening back, we both decided that it could be triggering to some people. And just out of respect to people who would be affected by, hearing that stuff, we decided to omit it. No one's being censored or anything like that. If you know me, I'm not the censoring type, but just out of respect for people, we decided to omit that. So he will be referenced in other parts of our conversation, but I decided to cut just one section of our chat. Anyway, continuing on.
And I'm not going to get too controversial tonight, but I'm gonna just say, I hear people a lot of times say, "Oh, I don't support this brand or this because they do that." Y'all, the reality is we really don't know what is happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, I mean, I also have this thing with like corporations. I'm like, it's a corporation. It's like thousands of people work there. Like, some graphic designer that was paid $64,000 a year worked on that commercial, and you're like canceling the entire commercial. Like, it just never really made sense to me when people get
this
like
is
that.
what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, if I go into a store and I have a bad experience, I'm absolutely allowed to say I don't want to spend my money there anymore. But when you hear about something on social media that's gone through 15 different outlets, we don't really know what happened, and you're basing your opinion of that on just this hearsay and all this. For me, it's like all of these corporations have stuff that, is less than moral, right?
Mm.
But let me tell you this. Shout out to all my people who really live their life in a holistic and natural way where they ain't with none of that shit. Right? You're not gonna catch them wearing Nikes or New Balance or Adidas or whatever. They don't mess with none of that. They live somewhere where they're growing their plants. They don't eat.
They grow their sneakers.
They're not eating. They listen. They're wearing certain sandals they made. I'm being serious. It's
no,
people
you're right. You're right.
who live that life, and I mess with them because they're saying I don't want none of that lifestyle, and I really respect that. But we can't sit here and split hairs like, oh, Nike. I'm not, because Adidas has a history.
Oh,
listen.
Gosh.
It's all either we choose to consume it or not. Now, what we can do, because we focus on where we're not going to spend our money, what the focus should be, I make sure to support at least 5 to 10 Black brands, Black owned brands, every like I think I do this like every 2 or 3 months where I check like, okay, I need to find like, you know what, I love streetwear and sweatshirts. Let me find a new black, owned place where I can buy, and this wasn't shout out to my sister-in-law because she was like, we had like Kwanzaa and she was like, are you buying from black businesses? And I was like, I mean, yeah, but I really wasn't. So I started to be intentional, right? So my focus
You
stopped
said
being
yeah, and it
like,
wasn't true.
and I was like, yeah, but I it wasn't intentional, right? Like if
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was buying
Like
from
don't
black
buy your
brand,
Kwanzaa stuff from Walmart.
exactly. So for me, I think we have to focus on, okay, well, this corporation or this artist or whatever, whatever, like if you're mad at Chris Brown, I respect you being mad at Chris Brown. But what I would prefer is find a local Chris Brown and go to their shows and give your money to them instead of just saying, I'm going to take Chris Brown off my list, but like, you know, Usher is okay. It's like, okay, so the corporate structure, you're all up in it and you're just going to choose which one. And by the way, all of these people have money, resource, and the time, they have anything they need to be able to conceal and hide whatever they want from us.
Mm.
Some things do eventually come to light, and where there's smoke, there is fire. And so I completely understand the other opinion of Chris Brown, which is like, where there's smoke, there's fire. Like, happened with Rihanna, happened with Carucci. I don't care if it hasn't happened in 6 to 7 years. He's an abuser to me. That's awesome. But who do you support then? Do you support your local Chris Brown? Because that's who really needs you.
I always try to think. I remember I heard a friend of mine gave me this advice. It's sat with me forever. He said only do the things that only you can do, and it's like only you can be a dad to your children. So that's the thing that you have to do because no one else is going to do it like you, or only you can be a husband or whatever. And I think about stuff like like recycling. I remember the whole thing with the straws. It's like I really don't think that the impact that I'm having on this industry or on this person's career or on this corporation, my tiny purchase decision is really going to make a huge difference. I will make a difference in the places where I do have impact. Like I have like a controversial opinion about like the environment, right? I don't believe that boycotts on straws or like getting better at recycling, whatever. I don't think that any of that stuff actually has an impact. I think voting does. So I think you should vote for people who are gonna, tax the corporations and make it hard for them to do these evil things. And
Agree.
that's where the real impact is happening. So I focus on the areas where I know I have impact, where I know
Yes.
only I can cast this vote.
Yes.
That's where I should focus my energy.
Yes.
And there's the whole thing with the environment too. It's like where corporations successfully shifted the blame on off of themselves onto individuals in terms of like the environment. It's like, oh, clean up the beaches and reduce, reuse, recycle is something that you have to do, when really like 99% of all the damage is being done is by the corporations, and it's happening
100%.
because of unfettered capitalism. So
100%.
the way to really have an impact is the way you vote. And so like when I think about like these artists and stuff, it's like me playing a song on Spotify. Maybe they won't make 0.0000036 today, but really, is that really impacting their life? No.
Yeah.
Like how you said, it's like support your local artist, support your local vendor or whatever. That's where you actually can have an actual impact. Um,
100%.
yeah. Um, Yeah, I remember I got into this argument with my cousins. And we went out for ice cream. They got so mad at me. They're like, "How could you use plastic straws?" Right? And I literally grabbed like a handful of straws. I grabbed like 40 straws from like this ice cream truck, and I threw them down the drain. I was like, "This is going to the ocean." They got so pissed at me.
That's crazy. This is going to go.
And it literally tells you like on the drain. I live in Jersey City. It's near the river. There's like a picture of a fish on the drain. It's like whatever you throw in here is going to the ocean. I'm like, yep. And I'm like, if you really want to make a difference, you got to vote. And it's an unfortunate thing that I know that the only way that we could improve this sort of thing is educating people. Um,
Facts. I'm all about education. Learning is the only way to like I just, through my spiritual practice, I learned that it is better. It's not better. It's the highest form of manifestation is to focus your attention on the things that you do enjoy, the things that you do want, the things that are good, the things that are, in the Bible it says meditate on these things.
Mm,
I think there's a lot of focus today on what who, what we don't want and negativity, and where your attention goes, that thing grows. So if we all spent a lot more time, like, you know, giving all the best energy ever to like our local Chris Brown,
mm,
like that's a really great way for you to like, there's an alternative. Like you don't like what he's representing for R&B music and for young black men, awesome. I promise you, you have a local Chris Brown who's like really talented but can't afford an interface and can't afford studio time,
mm.
can't afford it. And I'm not saying to go to that young man's house and pick him up and feed him. I'm just saying when he gets on Instagram and he gets on Facebook and he says I have a show next week. Why don't you show up?
Mm.
Um, I just I have learned so much in the past 5 years about like, wow, when my attention goes to just like the things that I really do love and that I do like, and supporting those who are around me and creating community around me, my life is just like 100 times better.
Mm.
Um, and that is probably the thing I wish they told us in music school, like about like
Yeah.
affecting our local communities, you know what I'm saying? And like
Mm-hmm.
how to make an impact on our local communities. Because what does everybody do? Like everybody moves to like LA or New York or Nashville.
Yeah.
And my wife and I have been in Milwaukee for the past 2 years, or well, like a year and 3 months, because our wedding was here and we had some, business. We got a property here, and like we were just like, all right, well, we're just like, we don't want to be traveling back and forth to take care of this property and to have our wedding, because planning a wedding when you're not in that state is just like a really hard thing to do. And so like we came here, and I kind of instantly got like involved in the community in a really meaningful way,
Mm.
in ways that I didn't really think like were going to happen. And I wish I had been doing this, like setting down roots and like getting involved in the communities that I live in outside of what it can do for me.
Mm.
Right. Because when you move to Nashville and Los Angeles and New York, and, whoever listens to this, you can say whatever you want in the comment section, but like, you're going there to get something,
Exactly.
right? I'm going to LA to get work, to get, whatever,
It's
whatever.
not
But
to
like,
give to LA, to
it's
give to
not
New
to
York,
give to Los
because New
Angeles.
York don't
Yeah,
need you.
right.
Mm.
So if my feeling is okay, like you want to move to New York to like whatever, then like get involved in like the local communities there and the local scenes there and become a part of it, and just watch how that just like feeds you in ways that are not necessarily based in like fame and like Instagram and social, but like ways that like actually like your soul feels good.
Mm.
And I've seen a couple friends do that as artists, and I'm like, well played. Like you did the right thing, because I think that's the only way life actually is meaningful and works out. It's
It's
like,
so weird because like I've lived my whole life serving in ministry and church and stuff, and flexing that muscle where you're thinking about yourself and doing things for yourself is not a muscle that I have learned to like. It's selflessness is something that the church teaches really well, because they want they want you to give yourself up and not get paid. Um,
the facts.
so like, um, I've actually, ever since leaving church, I have like a bad taste in my mouth with anything involving helping anybody, because I associate those feelings with, and it's just super weird, with like serving at church. Like, I thought about what it would look like for, my kids are really little now, but I know eventually as they get older, I want them to get involved in the community and serve, or, do the soup kitchen thing and the whole shebang. And I have so many like PTSD feelings about it that I associate with serving at church, that I still get an ickiness. Like, and I mentioned this before in other podcasts too, where like, the guitar is hanging behind my head right now on the walls. I haven't touched them since I moved to this house. I will eventually. I have to, because every time I pick it up, I think about like church stuff and church music, and the licks I play. They just gospel comes out, and like it's something that I should probably seek therapy for. But like I do so closely associate like those behaviors with church and like spiritual and faith and the whole thing, and like yeah, I gotta get over that. I really do.
Yeah, but there's a way, and I'm gonna say this, you know, giving doesn't mean free.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
the disservice that the church does. I'm not going to say the church, but some churches do to its staff and the people who, just because I have pledged my life to be a servant doesn't mean I have to do that and lessen the value of what I bring. Right.
Hmm.
And I've learned this lesson, like when I say over and over again, like I've been on both sides of the lesson. And I say that because like a really good example is just like creating music. Like, so I'm a producer, right? And there's a very big difference between producers and beat makers. Controversial. We can get into that at another time, but I use a lot of live instrumentation in my production. And so I do this kind of method of like guerrilla style, like pack my laptop up and bring my little interface over to like musicians' houses, and like, we're drinking beers and, hey, can you just record this little lick? This is when I was in LA. Like I'll say this is 5-6 years ago. Since then I don't drink anymore and I haven't been to any musicians' houses, but I'm just giving, kind of an example of how I go about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there was a brotherhood that like I had with a few different musicians where like they're like, I got you.
Mm.
And I'm asking them like, how much do you need? Like how much, like, do you want to be paid? Do you not want to be paid? Like, what's up? And like they'll be like, just buy me some beer, or something, right? And I go over to their house and we have a great time and whatever. But there was a time period before that where I truly was just struggling financially.
Mm.
Right? Like truly struggling financially. And as a producer and an artist, my like trajectory, like career trajectory was different than like some of my musician friends because they would get gigs playing their instruments. Mm-hmm. Right? So you take somebody who like I had a friendship with or who we had like this brotherhood with or like whatever, and now they're making say like $60,000 a year with their instrument.
Yeah.
Right. And here comes Joy, the friend, right? Like, hey, bro, I need some like tracks laid down. Like, help me out. And I think one might say like, well, they should just help you because of the friendship. And it's like, mm-hmm. It's different now.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is how they feed their family. Rent's not going to pay itself. Exposure is not going to cut it. I can't pay my rent with exposure. Yeah. Right? And I got into this situation of feeling really, I was just like, I felt dirty asking. I needed the help because I still wanted to create music. And I wanted it to create it in my way, but I couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. I got to a point where I could not afford to produce what I was looking at. And mind you, so these guys come up with me, right? So I'm 36. We're in the same age group. These are killers, right? As far as how good they are on their instrument, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard for me to find that, right? Yeah. Right? That's years of experience. Yeah. Right?
We're not 19 anymore.
We're not
we're
19
not Berklee.
Anymore, right? These guys have toured this, and me too. We've toured, we've all done our thing. So there's a certain level of sage wisdom they're bringing with what they bring to my record. And I've gotten to a point now where I've just like I got to a point where I was like, okay, Joy, you got to realize like if you're putting out the energy of like begging for your friends who like make money doing this to help you out, then when it's time for you to get paid, like no matter who it is, you're not going to get paid because you may not reap
Mm,
where you sowed, but you will reap,
yeah.
right? And so I started getting to the mindset like if I want to be paid to do music, then I got to start paying my friends, a certain amount of money or like and be honest about what I can do, but always make sure they're paid. Like
Mm.
always make sure they're paid. And since then, I've had better interactions. I felt better about what I was doing. I've felt a more of a sense of pride because, like, when you send that person that cash up and you're like, "Hey, like, thank you so much," like, it's just a different feeling and a different vibe,
It's so
right?
funny. Like there was a period where almost every gig that I was getting was with some kind of uh, hip hop, gospel, black and Hispanic people music,
Right. Yes.
reggaeton, whatever.
Right.
And the vibe and the expectations are so different from the white megachurch. Like when I started working at this megachurch, it was not at all the same in terms of like how this stuff was approached. Like I'm talking like I don't know if I'm on TikTok. There's just this viral moment right now with like this $3 million freaking Christmas production that some church in Texas is putting together, and everybody having their opinions about that, and nobody's not getting paid. Everybody who needs to get paid is getting paid, and there's no question. And like, um, it's one of these things where it's like, it's really just a change of like of approach and mentality and whatever. It's like, if you are ready to to spend the money, then the money will be there. So it's like, I don't know. It's part of this thing we were talking about earlier with the scarcity thing, where like people who come from these backgrounds, giving up $1 for any kind of service is like a big deal, even if they have the money.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, I
But we
remember.
got to get out of that.
Yeah, I remember playing with this band, and we were opening for Alicia Keys at the Apollo, and I didn't get paid. And I was like, "Are you serious?" Like it was the wildest and the weirdest experience of my life. And this same band, we opened for the Clark sisters, um, and I did not get paid.
Yeah.
And at the
It's
time,
real.
I was doing it. Exposure was gonna pay my rent.
Well, yeah. Let me tell you. So I did South by Southwest in 20, might have been 2017, 2016. I don't know, maybe 2015.
Mm,
I'm getting old. And I think I paid for everybody to get there. Like they drove I was on tour, so they drove my car. So like I paid for everybody to get there. And like we weren't getting paid for the spot. So I
mm,
couldn't pay anybody, right? I remember like hitting up we like at one point my bass player drops out. He couldn't do it, right? So I I'm like, yo, who, I'm talking to my MD. I'm like, who can we get, whatever. And he was like giving me some names. So like I hit up this dude who like had a very strong local presence, like played for the local church, like was playing for like making, like I said, easily 50, 60K on his instrument in the city,
mm.
right? So I email him and I'm like, laying out what is up. Like, so they're driving. I'm paying for everybody's, like, I'm paying for a hotel room. I'm paying for everybody to get there. But like, I can't pay you. We're not getting paid for the gig. But like, it's honestly just going to be fun. Like, what's up? And like he didn't respond. You know what I mean? And I remember calling my MD and I'm like, he didn't respond. But he was like, yeah, bro, like, he's getting married next year. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Ain't
Like,
nobody got time for that.
he don't have time, right? And so, you know, and I remember even times back then when I was trying to get recordings and stuff done, and I was trying to I started this like live music night in LA, and like I remember hitting up a similar story, hitting up a dude who like wife and a kid at the time, and but we came up together kind of, so I knew him. I'm like, hey, I'm paying $75 a night. He never hit me. Yes.
It's so
but
funny. Like I think about that now, and like my life is such a different place now. Like I remember this whole time. I actually got started working. Like I'm in the creative field now. I do like design and advertising and marketing and all that stuff. And I actually got started doing press kits for like artists and stuff. And it's like, oh, I need a photo shoot. I need a website. At the time, MySpace was the thing. I was like, I need my MySpace hooked up.
yeah,
Like I need this and that, whatever. And I remember people asking for like concert posters. I was like, oh, I could do that. And I started working on concert posters for people. And I was like, I'm making way more money doing this stuff than the actual music. And I'm like, what's going on? And eventually, I own a home in one of the most expensive parts of the country right now. And I drive a Tesla. I have 2 kids and a 5-bedroom house, and which is for people who living in Hudson County, it's a big deal. Um, and it wasn't playing no damn music.
yeah. I mean, I, you know, yeah. I mean, I have a similar
What are you doing now?
story.
What? You're
Yeah,
like
so
a
I work
mogul
at
now. You're like freaking like what's going on?
yeah.
What are you
So
doing?
I own a property management company with my wife. We have, I think we have like five or six. It's more,
Mm,
but we have properties that we manage.
okay.
We just bought our first one this past summer. Everything else is under our portfolio of management. We do short term rental, so Airbnb, Verbo, so on and so forth, and that changed our lives. It's a 6-figure uh revenue company 2 years in a row,
Mm,
so added a lot of cash flow into our lives, of course. But when I graduated from Berkeley, I somebody told me to go work for Apple, and I was like, okay. And that was like my introduction into tech, and that was in 2008. Fast forward, I stayed at Apple all the way up until 2015
mm,
when I was touring as a background vocalist and doing all that great stuff, and Sam Smith, Stevie Wonder, so on and so forth. And you know, that was at the time where I felt this like, oh yeah, I'm gonna quit my job and be full-time music now. Because I had never made that much money as a solo artist,
mm.
doing gig to gig. I had never made that much money ever. The money that I saw on tour, I had never made that much money ever in music. But the thing about making money on tour is that, guess what? You make it
The
during the
tours
tour,
end.
and then when the tour is over, you got to go home. And if you're not gonna keep getting booked, that is a very dicey life to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time that I got off tour, I was married to my first wife, and she had 3 children, so I was helping to raise them. And like, it's like you go outside with a family of 5 and you breathe. It's like it costs money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just was like, I was in a very terrible financial place. And so I kind of started getting back into corporate around that time. Like I was like, the gigs are not coming fast enough.
Mm.
Like my bills are coming every month, but I'm doing a gig every however long. And even if I make $2,000 just for a couple hours of my time, that is not enough to sustain me and this family.
Yep.
So I went back into corporate America for like a couple years, I'll say in like 2016. And I was working for Honda Motor Company, who was going through, and is still going through, I think, this like airbag crisis that they had going on.
Mm.
And so I was there for 2 years, and I left the company because I always like to tell this story because, it really was a like triumphant moment for me. But anyway, like, so I get to work one day, and there's security. It has a huge building, right? They're pretty much just like this is like their headquarters in the West Coast. And there's like security all over the parking lot. And the parking lot is like very large, like almost like a football field and a half of just like cars parked and stuff. And then you go into the building.
Mm.
So when you park your car, you have a pretty long walk to the door. Like you
Yep.
have to like plan for that so that you get to work on time.
Okay.
So I'm seeing, so one of the security guards who I know was in the like little security vehicle and was like, get in. I'm going to walk you up to the door. And I was like, thinking to myself, you should have been driving me up to the door every day. Like, this will cut my walking time in half. Okay, whatever, right? So she drives me to the door and I get inside. There's just like a weird vibe at work. And like, this was a call center with like, maybe 500 people on one floor, right? So you can see just all the cubicles and stuff. So long story short, I'm asking around. I'm like, what happened? What happened? What's going on? And everybody's like, no one knows. So around noon, like finally people start finding out what's going on. And what it was that this job used to just like fire people.
Mm.
Right? Like they had a culture of like there was a point system because there's so many people who work there. They had these very strict rules. If you're late a certain amount of time, you get, whatever. And they changed the attendance policy a few times, but like they would really fire people a lot. There was a lot, it's high turnover, right?
Okay.
So the fact that I was even there for 2 years was like a miracle. And they fired these two guys. And that the night before, those two guys put on YouTube that they were going to come up to the place and shoot everybody.
Oh my gosh. What
right?
the heck?
So, and one of them, his YouTube channel was like a channel dedicated to like guns and combat and like all of this stuff. So there was never a formal communication sent to us, the employees, about this. But obviously we could tell like the reaction, like we were getting emails like you don't let, if a person doesn't have their key card, you don't let them in. Like we were just getting, and the security was driving us up and whatever. And I sat there and I just thought to myself, so y'all didn't even want to give me the opportunity to not come in today. Like to me, my life was worth you sending an email the night before and like saying to all the employees, like, hey, we have a threat. And if you don't want to come in, we understand. And you won't get docked for that. You won't get paid for the day, but you won't get docked. Okay. So I decided right then, I said, I think I put my 2 weeks notice in like probably a day later. And I drove Uber for 2 years. Right. And like full-time Uber, like made like a lot of money. Uber is actually extremely lucrative in big cities. Right. And so drove my car into the ground, but at least I had my integrity, right? Like I was like, I'm not going to let these people treat me like that.
Yeah.
And that was kind of when I got into like kind of this freelance vibe. Like I'm like, okay, cool. Like I can drive Uber, but that it doesn't. There's no schedule, so I can do studio time. And I started to work on a project in LA. I got hired to do this project, and it's a story that happens to a lot of us in LA. Like I worked on the project for a year, didn't really get paid very much to do it, and of course the project went down a drain. I was promised a publishing deal. I was promised all these things, and it never went through. And I mean, heartbroken. I mean, that's a traumatic event for me because I finally thought I had reached a space, because I went to LA under the idea that I was going to tour and I was going to like write songs and do like studio work while I was at home. And it just never panned out for me, both because of my own fault, right? Having, this marriage that wasn't exactly right. And, I lived far out from the city, so I wasn't really to, commute the way I really wanted to. And there was a lot of responsibility with, a wife and 3 kids. But also me just not having the mental fortitude to like push through certain things. And so when I found this project, I was like, yes, it was around the time that I was like getting my divorce, and I was like, awesome. Like I'm going to be finally able to do something meaningful that's going to like change, in the music industry. That's what we do. We think about this one event that's going to change everything. Yes. Yeah. I thought this was that, and it wasn't. And I was just like heartbroken. And my now wife, we started dating, and she had been an entrepreneur for like 7 years and had her own cleaning business. And like, she lived this very cushy life.
We know where this story's going.
Listen, like she had this very cushy life, right? Like she was making amazing money from her cleaning business. And she had this life that was like, I do what I want when I want. I travel. I do whatever. And, she kind of like would be looking at me like, so you have all these skills in tech and all these things that you can do, and you don't go make money doing that? And I was like, well, because I'm focused on the music. And she was like, you can't focus on your music while also like doing those things. And I was like, you know what I mean? I had never thought about it that way. So I had to humble myself a little bit, because she would like go and like have clients, like cleaning clients, and I mean making like a lot of money, right? And she
Mm.
would like be like, I'm about to go do this job by myself. You want to come make some money? you know? And I would be like, the masculine, part of me like, nah, girl, do your thing. I don't need no, nah, girl, go ahead. And like she would be like, you need this money. She's like, I know how much you make.
It's so funny, like how and this happens a lot with, I think, anybody in like a creative fields, especially, where it's like, if you're not doing specifically the thing that you told yourself you were going to be doing when you were freaking 17, when you were a dumbass 17-year-old, then you feel like you failed in life. And like I have a friend that, like, he he's pretty successful now. He's doing his thing. He's a producer, a musician, whatever. But he was just so like disgusted by needing like a security job on the side to like pay his rent. And I'm like, dude, like, you gotta you gotta do what you gotta do.
Let
Like,
me tell you.
we're not in a world that, we live in a society where you gotta pay your bills, and there's no shame in that. And also, like, the statistically, the chances of these dreams that you have when you're 17 coming true, it's like the lottery. So it's like, number one, you have to be okay with your life taking a different direction, and number two, it's like, you are not your job. You are not the thing that pays your
That's
bills. That's
right.
not who
That's
you
right.
are.
That's
Like,
right.
there's other ways of seeking fulfillment. I know a lot of musicians that really what they want to do is travel. It's like, I want to go on tour. I want to see the world. It's like, you actually just want to travel. It's like, get a job, make a lot of money, and travel.
And you can travel.
And or some people that they want to be able to do something creative. It's like, well, use your hands and do something. Like, it's there's other ways of being fulfilled other than this one dream that you
This
set
one
yourself when you're a
road.
freaking
Yeah.
teenager.
Things
Um,
can be true simultaneously.
mhm.
Like you can be a musician and be like a person who has a corporate job. Like they can exist together. And when I started dating her, she helped me to understand because she's also a singer and also like very well known in her city
Oh,
for
I
singing.
saw that. I've seen videos. She has a beautiful voice.
Yeah, she's an incredible singer.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, you know, that's what, originally attracted us together was the music part. And she showed me that like she owns the cleaning company. She was a singer. She did all these things. So she showed me that like I didn't have to choose this one thing. And so like I humbled myself down with the mop and the like rag and her little like t-shirt, her cleaning company t-shirt, and I would go like clean and work for her, and she was my boss. And it was a whole year of that. And eventually I got an opportunity when we came here, after starting our cleaning business or starting our property management company. We started that because we were cleaning Airbnbs and making a ton of money. And she said to me, if they're paying us this much to clean them,
Mm.
if we had them, then we'd probably be making a lot of money. And I was like, you're smart. And then I said, I don't want to do it. It's too much of a risk. And she was like, are you kidding me? We're going to do this. And, reluctantly, I gave her the money, and we started the company. And then it started
Reluctantly,
doing what, for
come,
real,
coming
reluctantly.
from the Mercedes driver over here,
I
who I
mean,
was celebrating from home. I was like, you get that money.
let me, but that's what I'm saying. Like, everything I have today, the clothes I wear, everything I have today, the places I've been able to go, I give her 100. I'm not gonna say 100% credit. I'm gonna give her 50% credit because I had to do the work, right? But like, she just helped me to see like like, are you dumb? Like that was her attitude was very much like, you're serious right now? Like you about to leave this money on the table? So anyway, we got to Milwaukee and I got an opportunity to work for a nonprofit that helps adults from underserved communities learn about tech and like web development and programming and project management and business. And then at the end of the 16-week program, we help them get a job and it changes their lives. I mean, I think they see something like a 300% increase in
Wow.
earnings. And we have something like an 85% placement rate or 89. So like you come out of our program, of course, we don't guarantee you're going to get a job, but 89% of our, if we have a cohort of 18, you know, 14 of them are going to get a job and they're going to get jobs making 75K, 85K, great money. And so I found out about that job and I said no at first. And my wife was like, "So you mean to tell me you have all this experience in tech? You work for Apple that long time. You've done all these projects on your own because tech had started to be after I left Apple, just started to even just be like a freelance way of me interacting. Like I would always be doing things in tech,
Mm.
even not even thinking about it. Like I just was always like doing little side projects and things like that." And she was like, "So you're gonna leave this money on the table when?" She's like, "For what?" And I had
I'm seeing a theme here.
Yes, exactly. And I said, okay, fine. And so I took the job and I've been there for like now like a year and like a couple months. And the one thing I can say is that I had never opened my mind to the fact that I have all these skills in tech. I have all this knowledge and understanding and know-how. And the tech industry, I just went to a conference last week. I mean, the salaries are crazy,
Mm.
the benefits are crazy, the companies are amazing, and there is a need for more and more and more and more tech professionals with the ever growing presence of social media and different apps and so on and so forth. Like we live in a world that's pretty much controlled by tech. So
Mm.
now I'm seeing a whole nother avenue for myself. But the reality is my love for music and my love for creating and my love for making us turning nothing into something. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was silence 2 days ago, and now it's a full-blown song. Like wow, that process still blows me away. So I'm still, I DJ now. That was something that showed up out of the pandemic, and I make money doing that now. So I'm in a space now where I don't think I've ever been this relaxed and happy and comfortable with just like my life.
Mm.
And so I'm really looking forward to like creating music from that space because I've always created music in a space of lack and deficit.
Mm.
And somewhere along the line at Berklee, I was convinced that it's always the best music you're going to make is the music when you're like hungry and when you're like in need.
Mm.
And I think that that's bullshit. I think that there's something about creating from a space of fullness.
Mm.
Both are necessary, right? There's
Or
different
both
what
are possible.
both are
Yeah.
possible. Yeah, right? And the Bible talks about there being different seasons, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we get that. And there's a time for everything. But right now I'm looking to make music that really embodies the human experience in a very joyful, no pun intended,
Mm.
joyful and from a space of wholeness. Because wholeness, and this is something that my spiritual practice has taught me, is that I think that in growing up in the church, we're taught a lot about holiness,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
And this concept that is really something we can never be, but it is
It's an
Christ.
unattainable thing that, yeah.
It's an unattainable thing that because of our relationship with Christ, we can attain it. And conversely, wholeness speaks to it's achievable. Wholeness is achievable even in spite of trauma, in spite of
Yep.
brokenness, in spite of all of that, because I have those things, right? Like divorce feels like failure. It's probably
Mm.
one of and having to like break off my relationship with, you know, the stepchildren I had a relationship with. Some of that stuff is real life shit that
Mm.
no one can walk you through. No one, no matter what your parents say, no matter what your friends, family say, you can't. That brokenness that you feel from loss, from grief,
Yeah.
from just different traumas that we all have our different, we all have our cross to bear, so to speak. Learning to be whole and not claim victimhood through those things is a ever evolving process that is really beautiful when you intentionally unfold it. And meditation did that for me.
Mm.
Meditation helped me to understand myself better than I understand anyone else. And I always tell, my new interns, whenever I get a new cohort, I always tell them when I'm having my first talk with them, like, my superpower is I know me better than I know anyone else. I know my shortcomings. I know my failures. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. I know my boundaries. I know so much about myself that 100 motherfuckers can't tell me nothing. For real. Because when you know yourself that well, everybody's trying to observe the room, right? And I get it. Everybody's spending a lot of time looking outward.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that a lot. If they would just do this, if the situation was just this, if they
The,
would
the,
this,
the
if
industry kind of like makes you do that in a
of
way.
course, and I
Yeah.
we were conditioned, right? Like my thought process was always in a space of lack and deficit. Like if they just maybe they don't like the masculine presenting. Oh, if maybe but what's happened to me is, and this is why the internet is a blessing. What's happened to me is I'm seeing masculine presenting black females making money, doing music, producing records, winning Grammys, doing all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, so you mean to tell me the problem was just my lack of seeing that this could happen? And of course, if you can see it, you can be it, right? So representation matters. I get that. But what I'm saying is when you see that happening, and it's not, I'm not saying it's a million of them, but there's a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? That when you see that happening for them, you say to yourself, oh, so I've been convincing myself it wasn't happening for me for those reasons. And look, it's happening for other people.
Mm.
So either I'm going to shut up and, and start doing my thing, or I'm going to keep saying that same thing. And it's a work in progress. I have records that are going to come out next year, and there's some things we're definitely going to be doing on the music front. But I've just started to get out of my own way in a very profound way. And knowing myself has exposed me to my own limiting beliefs, because not everything we say is what we really think and feel inside. Like, yeah, I believe it. And you could do anything. Anybody from anywhere can be anything. And you say all that stuff. And in your mind, you're going, it's never going to happen for you. It's never going to happen.
Mm.
I had to really deal with matching the positive joy that everybody knows and has seen and has loved for all these years, matching that with my insides. And that was the work in progress, and my meditation practice and my spiritual practice of just really trying to get to the most authentic me that there could possibly be, um, has led me to where I'm at today. So I said all that to say I'm probably the happiest I've ever been, with the most responsibility I've ever had and the highest stakes I've ever had. Um,
I think that
and
a
it's
lot of it's I could um you could probably attribute a lot of it to like your hierarchy of needs being met. It's like you're in a place where you're not worried about money, you're not worried about your relationship, you're not worried about what's going on with your career. It's like as soon as the worries are out of the way, and it's not even necessarily about whether you've succeeded in the goals you've set out for yourself. It's like you're in a place where you're not chasing. Um, it's like you can finally like stop and just look around and literally smell the roses. Like
ooh,
it's something that like I personally, I'm in a place in my life where I never stopped thinking about my 5-year, 10-year plan or whatever. It's something that was on the back of my mind constantly until very recently. Like saving up for the house, and like, it started with like, oh, I got to find a wife. Oh, we got to save for a wedding. Oh, we got to save for the car. Oh, we got to save for this. Oh, we got to have children. Oh, we got to do this. It's like we're constantly looking, what's the next step? What's the next? And as soon as I think for me, it was like moving into this house and seeing my kids, grow. My son's in school now, and just sort of like chilling. It's I don't care about what's happening next. I'm just kind of just living, and it's also therapy. I did some therapy this year that helped a lot.
I sure
It's
do have a therapist. Yep.
it's like it's allowed me to just live my life and not think about where my life is going. It's like just live the life that you're in. And and also thinking about like the core of what are the things that I do want for my life. It's like I was saying before, it's like, do you want to go on tour and be a musician, or do you just want to travel? It's like, do you like making music, or do you like creating things from nothing? And tapping into like, what is the core of the thing that I want, and doing that. That's really what's been the most fulfilling thing for me.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I want to be respectful of your time. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I've learned so much about you, and I feel like I got insider information of one of the most interesting people on earth. I've always found you to be like seriously, like one of the most interesting and multifaceted people ever. And a lot of people that came out of Berklee, they're just musicians, and like that's it. And I feel like that's not you at all. You have like, you're multifaceted. You're like a gem. You have all different angles, and I really appreciate it about you. And I
Wow.
thank you for giving me these 2 hours, because you'll never get them back.
Facts. No, I appreciate this. I think, there's a portion. I'm really a person who likes to talk. Like, conversation is like one of my favorite things to do.
Mm,
And there's a part of conversation I think that has healing energy. So I thank you, even because I think that the more that I hear your story and I hear mine, it's like, oh, we're not alone, right? Like,
mm,
we've all been through these things. We've all had trauma and devastation and these different things, but like, somehow we end up okay in the end. And we also hold space for those who don't, right? And that's some really cool stuff. And I just love that you're like building community through having conversations with people. That's
yeah.
awesome. So thank you for having me. And I look forward to hearing this back, because we went through a lot of different things. So I'm,
Yeah.
I'm, I'm interested. I'm interested in hearing how it comes out.